Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, we are on chapter 46. So we are kind of taken back in time a little bit throughout this chapter, and the plot device that Stephen King uses is Fran's diary. So we are on the 27th of July, and this would be a day after Nick, Mother Abigail, and all those people left Nebraska for Colorado, because they left on the 26th. So July 27th, Stu, Franny, Harold, and a couple other people, Glenn, Mark Braddock, and Perion McCarthy. They are all together now, and they're camping in a town that has been burned. Quote, Stu said it had probably been lightning. Harold had of course disputed that. These days, if Stu Redmond said a fire truck was red, Harold Lauder would produce facts and figures proving that most of them these days were green. Page 524. So Harold is just a little jerk. He feels so threatened that he has to fight about every little thing. Everything that Stu says, Harold seems to take it as a personal affront, and he has to correct Stu or come up with, he just always has to be the devil's advocate. We find out that in order to keep the dreams of Randall Flagg away, everyone in this group has been taking a medicine called Veronal. And they've been taking half of a pill to stop the dream cycle from starting. And Franny has been refusing hers, but not telling anyone. She takes it and then hides it. And this is because she's not certain that it's good for the baby. So Franny is still having nightmares. And she's starting to get really creeped out by Harold. Quote, she felt badly for Harold, but Harold had also begun to frighten her. Page 525. Franny has started developing feelings for Stu, and she feels like she is in the middle of this little love triangle that she didn't ask to be in the middle of. And she's trying to spare Harold's feelings, but she also really is starting to like Stu a lot. Quote, if she had to exist in a world like this, she thought, with a biological clock inside her set to go off in 6 months, she wanted someone like Stu Redmond to be her man. No, not someone like. She wanted him. Page 527. So Franny is being too ginger, I think, with Harold's feelings, and she should have just put a stop to his crush immediately and said, hey, I want to be with Stu. Sorry, Harold. But she's kind of waiting for Harold to meet someone else, someone that he can be with, to, like, I guess, let him down gently. I don't know. I don't know the plan, but it's not a good plan. Franny is having dreams where Randall Flagg is chasing her with a coat hanger, and she realizes that he wants her baby. So in the middle of these terrible dreams, someone wakes her up, and she finds out that Mark is sick. Quote, sickness was the thing they were all most afraid of, page 529. But what Mark has is not the flu, not the cold, nothing like that. Mark is in pain because of his appendix. Unfortunately, they have deduced that his appendix needs to come out. And just the sheer magnitude of what they're facing is insane, because none of them are doctors. None of them would know what to do if they opened him up, and they would not only have to know how to do it, but they'd also have to prevent him from bleeding out during the process. They'd have to find a way to put him under. It's insane to think that a little thing like an appendix is going to cause them so much trouble. So they decide that they're going to try to operate on Mark, which is better than doing nothing, but no one is really excited to do this. And Stu and Glenn go and get some supplies, and they get some medical books. And as Mark is being operated on, Stu is getting really into it. Like, he is figuring this out. It's really impressive, and he has almost extracted the appendix, and Mark dies. Harold left during the operation because he felt nauseous, and Franny, when Mark dies, Franny walks over and hugs Stu as like a comforting gesture, not as a romantic one, but Harold sees it and he leaves. He goes off and pouts. Later that night, Perion, who had been with Mark and who had been very upset by his death, kills herself. She overdoses on the Veronal that everyone has been taking. She goes into whoever was, I think it was Glenn's knapsack, and takes all of it and dies. So more from Franny's diary. Quote, Harold is, in his own weird way, sort of cool, when he's not concentrating all his mental energies on being an asshole, that is. Page 545. So I do like this plot device because it allows us to catch up quickly and kind of experience their progress from Stovington on, but we don't have to go through the mundane day-to-day. We just get little highlights, you know. Chapter 47. We are still with Stu, Glenn, Franny, and Harold. On the 30th of July, they have gotten an early start, and as they are rounding a curve, there's a roadblock. There are 4 men and 8 women, and the men are holding these women as prisoners. There's a shootout, it's chaotic, everyone is inexperienced, everyone just feels too slow and too unprepared because it was an ambush, and apparently these men have been taking these women around, calling them the zoo or the harem, and the men kept these women drugged all day and all night. They've been abusing them sexually, and they have been spying on Stu, Glenn, Harold, and Fran, and they wanted to add Fran to their zoo. So the fact that they end up killing all of these men, and some of the women survived. There's Dana Jurgens, Susan Stern, Patty Kroger, Shirley Hammett, and a woman who they don't know her name. The 5 of them survive out of the 8 women. And once they liberate the women, they join them, and Franny is starting to get jealous because Dana is interacting with Stu, and she feels like her chance has passed. All of a sudden she's freaked out that, maybe she waited too long, she should have made a move on Stu, but now this other woman is involved, and she's really scared that this woman wants Stu and vice versa. Quote, she happened to glance at Harold and saw that Harold was smiling in a guarded way, one hand up to his mouth to conceal it. It looked like a smile of relief. She suddenly felt that she would like to stand up, walk casually over to Harold, and hook his eyes out of his head with her fingernails. Page 562. So, I really love that because the fact that Franny thinks that she might have missed her opportunity with Stu gives Harold such delight, and it's maddening. I would be pissed off too. It's so frustrating. Harold is so frustrating. Later that night, Stu and Franny watch the sunset together, and Stu says he's had dreams of Flag crucifying people. Quote, lines of crosses along Highway 15, made out of barn beams and telephone poles, people hanging off them. Page 567. So they start discussing Flag and how Franny hasn't been taking the medication, and she's also been dreaming of Flag. And Stu kisses her, which is a nice surprise because we kind of think that maybe he is with, or maybe he does want to be with this Dana woman. But apparently he does still like Fran. So he kisses her, they have sex, she tells him that she's pregnant, they have sex again, and Harold has been spying on them from the bushes. So we know that Harold knows what's happening, even though they are going to keep this a secret from Harold. But now we know that Harold knows. It's one of those things that makes you uneasy. So when Franny falls asleep, she has written about this encounter in her diary. Harold stands over her menacingly, and he steals her diary from her backpack. Quote, for just a moment, it seemed possible to stop, to put the diary back where he had found it, to give her up, to let them go their own way before something terrible and irrevocable happened. Page 572. But Harold does not put the diary back. He does not stop. He reads it. He returns the diary. He's furious. And he has this dream of the red eye that we talked about. Quote, and then a frightful red eye opened in the dark, vulpine, eldritch. The eye terrified him, yet held him. The eye beckoned him. Page 573. So after that night, Harold starts acting ridiculously happy, which is not normal for him, and it makes people nervous. And Franny even remarks on it that he seems to be in good spirits. And, quote, that night, Harold began his own journal, page 574. Chapter 48. Trash Can Man has reached Las Vegas, which he refers to as Ciabola. And he's burned himself very badly. He set a fire and it didn't go as planned and he burned himself. Quote, dying and being out of his exquisite misery would be wonderful. Dying in flames would be utter horror, page 580. So Flagg has promised Trash Can Man a place at his side, and he has promised him a great burning. So Trash Can Man heads west. As he's crossing through Nebraska, quote, there was something wrong about Nebraska, something dreadfully wrong, something that made him afraid. It looked about the same as Iowa, but it wasn't. The dark man had come to him every previous night in dreams, but when Trashy crossed into Nebraska, the dark man came no more. Page 585. So instead, he has dreams of Mother Abigail when he's in Nebraska, and she turns him into a weasel. And it's very interesting that you can already kind of tell who people are and who they're going to associate with based on what they're dreaming about, who their nightmares about. You know, if you have nightmares about Mother Abigail, you're going to be on the bad side and join Flagg, and vice versa. So then Trash Can Man meets the kid in Colorado, and he looks like baby Elvis. The kid is going to go out west and overthrow Flagg. That's his plan. He is a deranged person. He has a car that he's in love with, and he is reckless and very quick to anger, and he's just basically crazy. So the kid and Trash Can Man kind of team up for a little while, even though Trash Can Man wants to get away from him as soon as he finds out that the kid is going to, you know, dispatch Flagg and take his spot. So when they hit a roadblock, the kid sends Trash Can ahead, and there's an 8-mile long car pileup, and Trash Can Man gets to the Eisenhower Tunnel, and he's too afraid to continue. He doesn't want to go into the dark, scary tunnel. So he ends up backtracking, and he's going to try and walk around where the kid left his car and avoid him. But the kid wakes up and sees him, and he's like, what are you doing? It's really cool because wolves come, sent by Randall Flagg, and they trap the kid in a car, and they just wait for him. They wait for him to come out. And the other wolves, who aren't a part of this, guide Trash Can Man on his journey. So they take him to the tunnel, and once they get through the tunnel, they just kind of disappear. Trash Can arrives in Vegas, and he's taken care of by Lloyd. He feels at home, and he feels like he finally belongs. He feels like people aren't going to make fun of him here. He feels like he has something to contribute. And Lloyd gives Trash Can one of those black stones with a red flaw that all the important people wear. And before taking it, Trash Can Man thinks, quote, this is my last chance to be Donald Merwin Albert, page 622. But he does end up taking the stone and committing to this way of life, you know, being one of Flagg's people. Quote, the dark man had saved him from dying at the hands of the kid. That the dark man might have sent the kid for just that purpose never crossed Trash Can Man's mind. And surely that meant his life was now a debt he owed to that same dark man. The man some of them here called the Walkin' Dude. His life, had he not himself offered it again and again? But your soul, did you offer your soul as well? Page 623. So, Trash Can Man has been saying, you know, my life for you, I give you my life, but, you know, now he's starting to question the fact that maybe he has also given away his immortal soul. Near the end of this chapter, there is a man Hector Drogan. That trash can man met once, and this man has been freebasing cocaine, which is forbidden in Flag's society, and he is ordered to be publicly crucified. So he gets crucified, and, quote, the crowd remained for almost an hour, each person afraid to be remarked upon as having been the first to leave. Page 625. And then after this crucifixion, Flag, who had been out of town when Trash Can arrived, asks to meet him. And so Trash Can Man goes up into the fancy penthouse type building and meets Flag. Chapter 49, Lucy Swan is now with Larry. So Larry had tried to put the moves on Nadine, she wasn't having it, so he has kind of given up on her and is now with Lucy Swan. They have found a CB radio, and they located Ralph Brentner on the Citizens Band 14. So they head to the Boulder Free Zone, as it's being called. And Nadine has been upset about the fact that everyone is dreaming about Flag, and she kind of thought that she was the only one. She thought that was like a special thing, I guess. Ever since she's been a child, she's had this idea that she is betrothed to something, some force, some person, and that thing is Randall Flagg. Quote, she knew that her purity, her virginity, was somehow important to the Dark Man. Page 639. So she has been saving herself for Randall Flagg, and she is very aware of who he is and what he does, and she kind of fights within herself. She kind of wants to be saved by the good side, but she also is drawn to the dark side. And quote, the others have been having two opposing dreams, the Dark Man and the Old Woman. The Old Woman seemed to stand for some sort of elemental force, just as the Dark Man did. The Old Woman was the nucleus the others were gradually cohering around. Nadine had never dreamed of her, only of the Dark Man. Page 641. So a lot of these people have been dreaming of both. They dream of Abigail and Flagg, and Nadine does not. She has not dreamt of Mother Abigail at all. Now Nadine is one of those people who does know Randall Flagg's name. Quote, Boulder was her last hope. The Old Woman was her last hope. Page 641. So she does kind of want salvation. She does kind of want to be on the side of good, but she also still wants Flagg. So she is very conflicted. Chapter 50. Stu and Glenn are talking about society, and they're kind of estimating that 8,000 people are going to arrive in Boulder by winter. And Glenn is saying, quote, when you and I first discussed this back in New Hampshire, I envisioned dozens of little tin pot societies. What I didn't count on, because I didn't know about it, was the all but irresistible pull of these two opposing dreams. Page 645. So they kind of feel like there aren't, and I think of like The Walking Dead again, you know, how they had all these little societies that eventually started merging into bigger societies. But yeah, that hasn't really happened. It hasn't been people establishing societies. It's been more everyone has chosen a side and they're going toward that. So they decide that they're going to start setting up a government in Boulder, and they're going to propose some representatives, and there are going to be votes, and all this stuff should be decided now. And Mother Abigail is going to have veto power because she is the one that everyone's dreaming about. Everyone is going to expect her to have some kind of input in this new society. Mother Abigail is back in her new Boulder house. Quote, they would get the power back on, of course. It was one of the things God had shown her in her dreams. She knew a goodish number of things about what was to come here, some from the dreams, some from her own common sense. The two were too intertwined to tell apart. Page 652. So she has this, she knows certain things about the fate of this society, and she knows that they'll have the power on, she knows that, you know, they are going to form their little government. She suspects that she is going to be kind of like a little figurehead, and she doesn't really precisely want that, but she'll probably have to go along with it. Quote, Harold made her nervous, all the time grinning, but the grin never touched his eyes. He was pleasant, he said the right things, but his eyes were like two cold flints poking out of the ground. Page 652. So Harold just emits this aura of weirdness. Everyone seems to think that he is not genuine. Like, they can tell that things are not what he is putting out there. So when asked about the restructuring of government, Mother Abigail is saying, quote, "What I want is to go on living free like I always have, like an American. I just want my say when it's time for me to have it, like an American." Page 656. So she doesn't really want to be in charge, but she just wants to have input. Larry's party finally arrives in Boulder, and Abigail meets him. She meets Lucy, Joe, and Nadine, and Abigail feels some kind of a flag presence in Nadine, and they kind of have a face-off. They kind of square off with each other, and it's really tense, and people observing it are kind of confused as to what's going on. But each one of them seems to know that the other is the opposition. Joe is able to speak again in the presence of Mother Abigail, and we find out that his name is Leo Rockway. And he loves Mother Abigail. He just falls instantly in love with her, feels comforted by her, and Nadine is trying to pull him away from Abigail. Quote, "He left Mother Abigail's arms, but reluctantly. 'You come back and see me whenever you want,' Abby said, but she did not raise her eyes to include Nadine." Page 660, which I think is like the perfect bitch slap to Nadine's soul. So now there's all this confusion and doubt. It's kind of like, well, is the thing that I sensed in Nadine really there? Or is she just a woman and I completely railroaded her into this perception of being Flag's evil concubine, or whatever you want to call her? Mother Abigail has a feeling, quote, "that she had missed something of great significance and might later be very sorry." Page 662. And then we get to Nick, who is, of course, going to be in charge of all of this community stuff. He is the government leader, basically, and he has already stricken Harold as a suggestion for the representatives that they were going to have. He has already taken Harold off the list. He doesn't want Harold anywhere near the decision-making process. So he doesn't like or trust Harold, which is kind of like a common thing. Quote, "Being Mother Abigail's people gave them no immunity to weakness, stupidity, or bad companions." Page 665. So I like that Nick realizes that just because they are on the side of good doesn't mean that there isn't still stuff that has to be looked out for. People have to be, people need to be kept in check. You can still be an idiot and you can still be a bad person and side up with Mother Abigail's team. Or you could just not be of the best caliber. Later that night, very late at night, Larry finally meets Franny, and he tells her the whole saga of him following Harold's trail. And as soon as he mentions the carving, Franny is kind of confused about it, and since she doesn't seem to have any knowledge of it, he does not say that her initials were included in the heart. He just says it was Harold's initials. Harold has become like a loner. He has left the group and he has gone off to live on his own. So Franny directs Larry to Arapahoe Street, which is where the Torrance family lived in The Shining. And Harold lives there on his own, and he has begun his own journal. Quote, "He would be leaving Boulder soon, a month or two, no more. When he finally settled on a method of settling his scores, then he would head out west. And when he got there, he would open his mouth and spill his guts about this place." Page 681. So Harold thinks he can realize his full potential in the West, and he thinks he'll just be stifled if he stays, and he's willing to sacrifice everyone at the Boulder Free Zone and, get his fresh start. So that is all for this week. Next week we start chapter 51.